the current issue of the Chronicle of Higher Education. This is a kind of inside baseball publication for higher education. And I read it because every now and then it has really interesting in-depth reporting on what's going on in the bowels of academia. And this place is a real menagerie these days. So you gotta look in there to find out all the crazy stuff they're doing. I want to talk about a scandal at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, a scandal involving a woman named Mary Boxill. Now, Mary Boxill is a philosophy instructor, but she's also somebody who kind of insinuated herself into the athletic programs at UNC Chapel Hill. She came to UNC Chapel Hill because her husband got a job there. She was able to get a job there, both as a teacher, but also as the kind of liaison to the college for all these different sports teams, not just the basketball team, but field hockey team, lacrosse team, swimming team, and so on. And in particular, she became kind of a champion of advancing the cause of African American athletes to sort of give them, she said, in her view, kind of a shot at higher education, except the shot at higher education had nothing to do with education. Basically, for Mary Boxill, this was an idea of coming to college, being a, quote, student athlete. But of course, the student part of it had no significance. The athlete part, as you can see, is the noun. The student is just an adjectival qualification to the noun. And so for Jan Boxill, it was not important that these students study anything, take any courses, get proper grades, or even graduate according to the requirements of UNC Chapel Hill. And so she set up, in effect, a system. Now, the key thing about her system is that it was done in collaboration with a whole bunch of people at UNC Chapel Hill. There was a kind of advisor for the African American Studies Department. So let's look at this. You've got an African American Studies Department with a woman named Crowder, Deborah Crowder. She's the department secretary. She's not even a professor. But what Mary Boxill does is she has these students all enroll in African American Studies courses that don't meet, that don't have any classes, that don't have any reading lists, and when they're supposed to turn in papers, Mary Boxill looks over the paper and then tells the African American department secretary what grade to give it. And there's smoking gun evidence of this in the form of emails, where basically Mary Boxill she sends a paper to Crowder. Crowder, by the way, the secretary of the department is grading the paper, not a professor, but the department secretary. And Crowder replies saying, "Did you say a D will do for the player? I'm only asking because A, no sources, B, it has nothing to do with the assignments for the class, and C, it seems to me to be a recycled paper. The student lifted the paper off the internet. That's not even their own work. It doesn't pertain to the class." So Boxill writes, quote, "Yes, a D will be fine. That's all she needs. I didn't look at the paper, but figured it was a recycled one as well, but I couldn't figure out from where." So here's the student advisor who knows the paper's bogus. So does the African American Studies secretary. And essentially they're all colluding in a scheme that makes a laughingstock of UNC Chapel Hill, makes the laughingstock of academic requirements at all. Julius Nyangoro, the African American Studies department chair, he was in on it. He's now resigned. And he says that he was under pressure to basically just give these athletes what they want. He says he recalls one particular situation. This is from an academic report. He goes, when he gave a women's basketball player a B+, even though he felt her paper was terrible and deserved an F. And he assigned that grade because Boxill told him, give that grade. There are instances of Boxill adding her own work to the players' papers, in effect, writing their papers for them, at least in part. And this is the way that these universities operate. Finally, there was a whistleblower, by the way, named Mary Willingham, a former colleague of Boxill, and she said, listen, Boxill is now claiming, I didn't know, I had no idea, my emails are taken out of context. But Mary Willingham says, listen, obviously she knew. I knew, the department knew, the college knew, we all knew. So in other words, this is a scandal a scandal in which these universities, and to some degree, you have to say, the universities themselves are taking advantage of the athlete. They're trying to leverage this athleticism for money. Obviously, college sports is big bucks for American universities. And so you have a really cynical collaboration. The student who wants to graduate but doesn't really care about doing the work. The college that is eager for the same reason to graduate the student but doesn't care about whether the student learns anything. And you've got these so-called race activists who themselves are cynical about it because their goal is just to get the student in quote marks, through the process. It is ultimately, I think, it shows the full degree to which corruption, cynicism, and lack of academic merit now pervades so much of higher education.